Welcome everyone. In today's video, I'm going to be putting the ceiling on and making the lights. I want to create some beams that will go, a couple of beams that will go across this main room. And now I'm taking some measurements to see how big I need to cut my piece for my ceiling. And I cut it out of foam board and my heavy cardstock. I had this great idea that I was just going to put the beam lines in with my ball stylist and that I would just paint it and then attach it to the foam board for the ceiling. And then and the reason why I did it this way is I hoped it would cut down on the warpage. And then I was going to paint the ceiling color. I was going to base coat it with the black first, and then I was going to go over it with the ivory color that I used on the walls. But I noticed that I couldn't see the lines that I etched in anymore for the beams. So then I tried to re-etch them in, and it left these horrible dark lines, and I thought, well, okay, maybe I can use that and work with it. And still, no, I didn't like that. So I decided just to move on and draw in the line where my beam would go and work on the beams for a little bit. I decided to fix that problem. I would just go ahead and cut some strips out of the cardstock and glue them on where the planks of the ceiling would be before I added the beams. I had hoped, since it was the ceiling, just to do it a really quick way, but it turns out I'll have to spend a little bit more time to get the look I wanted. So I had to step away for a little bit and just work on these beams. And I took a couple of pieces of foam board and cut them in strips. I glued 2 layers of the strips together, and then on 3 sides I glued them down to this piece of cardstock and cut them away, only on 3 sides. That way they were finished on 3 sides. And then, of course, I got to do my favorite thing, and I sanded all of the sharp edges to soften it and make it look like one piece of wood for the beam. And here's how they look complete. Then I sealed them with a light coat of Mod Podge. Then I realized that I forgot to scratch some of the wood grain into it because I wanted them to look kind of rough. So here I'm adding some of that. Sometimes I do it before, sometimes I do it after the Mod Podge. And now I'm base coating them with black. I just knew I wanted brown, but I wasn't sure what kind of brown, so I took some of this burnt umber and was applying it just lightly to see how I liked it. I didn't want to give it a solid coat because I wanted some of the black to shine, to poke through, so it would look kind of rustic. And now back to the planks for the ceiling. I'm just quickly, not measuring, just using the ruler to keep a straight line and drawing some lines out on my heavy cardstock that I'm going to cut out with my scissors. And I'm not even doing a perfect job. I'm just quickly cutting out some strips that are going to be the ceiling planks. I'm working in small sections. I paint a little bit of the glue and then I just put the strips down, and I don't want them sitting right next to each other. I wanted to leave a little bit of a gap. Once I have them all glued down, I give it a coat of Mod Podge and then a base coat of black. Then I took some of the ivory that I used on the walls to paint the ceiling just slightly. And I didn't even want to get in the cracks, so I used a cosmetic sponge and I just sponged it on, hoping that I would not get any paint in those cracks. Thankfully, I was pretty happy with the ceiling now, so I went ahead and glued on the ceiling planks. While I was gluing them on, I was trying to think, how am I going to attach the lights to this ceiling? How will I know where to place them? How will I know how to drill the hole? I have been very worried about this light situation. I just laid the ceiling piece over the top so that I could get an idea of what it looked like and make sure my beams weren't running into anything that I had glued on the shelves. Here I'm showing you that I made a template for my lampshades, and I paper quilled the little disc on the inside and the other little beads that I will use to make up the lamp. These little pipettes I used for my lamp in my lamp video, and I had this piece left, and so I just cut it. I think that was 2 inches, and I string my paper quilled little beads onto it. I had to be careful how I was putting the glue because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to clog up the hole of the pipette tube, because that's what I wanted to run my wires through. I paper quilled various sizes and shapes. This one here was kind of a fat round one, and I also had some that were just little disc, a little bit wider of a disc, or a smaller round one. And I had a sequence of how I wanted to go, but for some reason when they were all laid out like this, I had to think for a moment which one was which and how I wanted to do it. And the way that I have the centers so big to fit that pipette tube is the 2 paper quilling tools that I ordered off of Amazon. One of them has a bigger the bigger shaft, and so that left a nice opening that was exactly the size that I needed to run my pipette through. And I like the fact that I had paper quilled the beads or the shapes first instead of paper quilling them like onto that tube. So it worked out perfectly. I can't wait to incorporate this into some table lamps later that will be working. And if you do happen to get some glue into the tube, just take a toothpick or a pokey tool and put it in there, and it'll come right out. Just don't let it dry in there. There's a section of the hanging light that does not have the paper beads, and that's an experiment to see how that goes. And then I just glued these towards the end, so I didn't have to keep track of a certain amount of space to leave open. I just added all the beads that I needed to the end there. Added a little bit of glue and then just slid it up to the end of that pipe. And this is how the lamp looks finished. And now I'm going to paint it a couple of coats of wood glue, and I'm hoping that seals that plastic tube that doesn't have beads, so it will help hold the paint. And then I give it a base coat of the ivory, but I'm only putting, not a base coat, but I'm only painting the inside of the lamp shade. And the outside is, all of the outside is getting painted this green. Once all of that's thoroughly dry, I give it a coat of diamond glaze. And this is how it looks complete. Here's the little lighting kit that I bought from Evan Designs, and it has 5 lights, the battery compartment, the switch, everything that you need. Not the batteries though. I took one of the little lights, and each light has a black and a red line attached to it. I pushed the wires up through the tube in my lamp, and then when I come close to the bulb, it has that little thick end, and I had to give it a little bit of a pinch, a good push. But I wanted to be gentle because since that is that plastic tubing, I was worried, what if something got a crack or came undone, something. But it didn't, and I just held that lampshade firmly and pushed my bulb in till I couldn't see the black part of the light anymore. And the lamp looks okay. It didn't get any cracks, and I think this is going to work. And then I just drilled a hole through my ceiling, and I run the wires up through there, and then I glued the little round disc at the end of my hanging light. I glued that to the ceiling, and then once it's up there and I've had it pressed down really well, I don't know why, but I decided to take some masking tape and just firmly tape those wires down on the other side of that ceiling. You'll see here in a minute. I have to say this was a lot less scary than I thought, and I'm not worried about lights anymore, especially if I use the little kits or lights from Evan Designs. And this is how it looks with all the wires on the other side and how I have a little piece of tape on them. This back room, the ceiling is a little bit more tricky because of the angle. So I'm showing you here how if I just cut my foam board, it leaves like a little ditch, a little crack there. So what I had to do was bevel it. And here's how it looks now, beveled. It fits up there flush. I usually take a piece of scrap foam board and practice this bevel because I don't know how much of a gap to leave. Sometimes you could leave more or less, but this is how much I used and it worked for that roof. So I think each time would be different. So I just had to experiment and play around till it came out just right. I glued all of the planks and did the ceiling exactly the same way as I did the main room, and here I'm just gluing it down. Because the ceiling is on an angle, I had to create a special foam board piece that I gave it a big bevel or cut an angle out of it so that the lamp would hang straight down and not like look crooked. Even though I didn't get it perfect, it's almost, but it's still a little bit off, but you can't tell really. Not even if you stick your head in there and look, you can't tell. I added the tape just like I did to the lights in the main room. I wanted to do an experiment to see if the lights do work, so I took all of the red wires and twisted them together with the switch and battery pack. And then I took all of the black. And now I'm going to press it, snap it, and voila! I have lights. And I'm excited, and I'm turning it on and off because I cannot believe that I did this. It was very exciting to me, and they look great. I am so happy. It looks so cozy. It really does now make me think about stepping into an old general store and how the lights are kind of yellow. I love it. Of course, I had to look all the way around the building, in the windows, in the back door on the porch area, and pulled a little panel off the back and make sure that that light was working in that little room, in the little storage room. And it is. I cannot believe I did this. I am so happy. And then, of course, you have to do the peek through the window thing. So the lights look fabulous outside from the front porch, too. I'm so happy. It was not as hard as I was making it out to be. I'm so glad that I didn't get scared and just use fairy lights instead, because that's what I've always done, is just use fairy lights. And this is just a little extra, has nothing to do with the store. But I wanted to pass along a little helpful hint. Use an 1/8 inch or a 1/4 inch measuring spoon that's round, the back side of it, to form your disc when you're making maybe the jugs or a mixing bowl or something. Because a lot of people in the comments here and there have mentioned to me that they have a hard time, and I do too, keeping it consistent. So this works out really well if you don't want to purchase something. I noticed that for me, the 1/8 inch works out a lot better than the 1/4, but the 1/4's good too. I think it just really depends upon the size of your disc that you're trying to form into a dome. When I was on Amazon looking for quilling tools, I noticed these plastic things that look like paint trays that were something about some kind of a form. I'll try to put the name of it in the description. So I bought one, and they come in they have different sizes on here. So whatever your project is, you could try out and see which ones might help you get a more consistent dome or a mixing bowl. And to flatten them, don't flatten them in your fingers up in the air. Set it on the table and press something onto it, and then you get that flat surface. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.